you're all very welcome. My name is Declan Fitzmaurice. I chair the technical committee for the Institute of Refrigeration in Ireland. And this is I think it's the 6th presentation in the series we're running over the summer on the public inquiry process for the proposed revision of the European standard EN378. So the 6th, they're lined up for a few weeks yet, and depending on how it goes, we may run towards August and maybe even into September. So as always, thank you welcome to all our members and attendees, and thank you to our corporate partners whose support allows us to run events like this. So it's free to join. I think we've close to 40 people registered today. So thank you to all our corporate partners. And just a quick note on a thank you on last week's webinar to Seamus Kerr from RSL, who covered ammonia, his favorite refrigerant. And that's interesting. So the webinar is saved, is uploaded to the IRI website. And this week we have Dave Paget. We're delighted to have Dave Paget from the IOR in the UK, and he'll be speaking about the IOR Institute of Refrigeration UK's documentation and support and guidance available for EN378 through their vast library of technical bulletins and guides. So we're very pleased about that, because we have an agreement with the IOR, and all the IRI members are affiliate members of the IOR in the UK and get access to all that documentation. So Dave will speak about that today. We're really delighted to have Dave. He's been in the industry a long time. He's currently the chair of the technical committee, the IOR technical committee, and he also chairs the mirror committee in BSI on refrigeration safety. He's been in the pressure vessel industry and refrigeration industry a long time, and most recently with Lloyd's Register as for conformity inspection. What he's speaking about obviously is the EN378. The current version is 2016. There's a proposed revision out at the moment, which is currently available. We've uploaded the 4 documents onto the IRI website, so you should get that from this afternoon, or you can access it through the NSAI. Just register and you can participate directly. And the IOR in the UK are doing something similar for residents of the UK. So Dave will speak about this later on, but there's a little information page on the IOR website pointing you to the revised documents and how to participate in the process. So I'll stop sharing. I'll hand over to David, and over to you, David.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your time and dropping in on this lunchtime session on what is a fairly stodgy subject, that of regulation and standards. But that was the brief I was given to talk about EN378 and raise awareness of the Institute of Refrigeration's guidance on this. So I hope everybody can see this. The role of EN3,
David?
We're not sharing that. Okay.
I can share your presentation if you'd like, and you can tell me when to go through to the next slide.
Yeah, it's sending me a link of some sort, and I don't really get what that's all about. So okay, maybe if you could just go through my slides, Declan.
I'll do that. So is this the correct one? Let me just see. Sorry, wrong one. Second.
Is it sharing now, Declan? Maybe it's sharing now.
Not, yeah, there we go. Oh, you're good. Thank you.
Right, okay, so interrupted by my understanding of the technology, but thank you everybody for bearing with us. So the brief that I had from Declan is to discuss the role of the EN378 and the available guidance from the IOR. I must stress this is the 2016 version of EN378. They're on a 10-year review cycle, which is even now going to be overstepped, I expect, and the previous one was in 2008. Possibly people still have copies of that. So as Declan said, I'm an old guy. I've been in the pressure vessel manufacturing industry for quite some time, and mainly with pressure vessels for refrigeration applications, and then spent 12 years with Lloyd's Register of Shipping on conformity assessment, which was an interesting end to my career. I've thoroughly enjoyed that role. Businesses today have lots of pressures, and I see the role of the Institute of Refrigeration to keep our members up to speed with regulations and the supporting standards. There's lots of things that impact businesses these days, apart from the commercial aspects. We've got ESG to think about. There's supply line issues these days, but we need to keep up with managing our risk and staying ahead, or at least involved in emerging legislation, which is where I'm coming from. The legislation that we're talking about mainly is the Pressure Equipment Directive, and the IOR decided that we needed to give our members a little bit of guidance on what this fairly complex bit of legislation is about. So we got an overview of the regulatory landscape, which was our guidance note number 24. There is an overview of the summary of the changes, and I'm talking about the 2008 version versus the 2016. So look at this with one eye half closed if you can. There's more changes on the horizon. As Declan just said, we got the PREN 2026, as it will probably be up for public comment. I'll get onto that in a moment. And then another standard which is little known, and that's EN14276, which is a useful brazing document. And as people get more involved with A2Ls and A3 fluids, we might find ourselves having to provide better evidence of our brazers, qualifications and our procedures. So the aim of this guidance note was to give guidance on all kinds of legislation, and as we heard the other day or last month from Espen Ronning, the ATEX directives aren't covered by EN378, so you've got to look at that separately. But EN378 is harmonised against the Pressure Equipment Directive and the Machinery Directive. What that means is if you can display that you've worked in accordance with that standard, there's a presumption of conformity to the directive. These directives, these harmonised directives, cover off all the applicable essential safety requirements in their annexes. ATEX requires a risk assessment, and that's detailed in this guidance notes. All refrigerants, regarding of their grouping, should have a risk assessment, even if it means it's the risk doesn't exist. Manufacturers of systems or products have two choices. They can follow a horizontal standard, which is a product standard such as EN3782016, which is for household appliances and similar things, or a horizontal standard, which EN378 is one of those standards, and it consists of 4 parts. Part 1 is the basic requirements and definitions. I'll talk a little bit about that at the close. Part 2 is the design considerations. So that's the document that the installers, manufacturers, project engineers will be referring to the most. Part 3 is to do with the installation site, and again, people that are doing on-site installs, including PPE and safety requirements. That's the bit that will apply to you. Part 4 has actually been withdrawn now, and that is covered by an ISO standard, which is known as 5149 Part 4. But again, unhear that little bit a bit, because there's every probability that Part 4 will come back into the EN378 series of standards. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of why that is, but that part includes all of the refrigerant data, and that's an important reference document when it comes to deciding upon charge sizes and leakage. So the summary of the changes in 2016 was to accommodate the flammability in Class 2L fluids. We had a change in the access categories. Occupancy category changed to access category. There was a change in the formulas to assess charge limits, and additional calculation methods added. The upper and lower limits were changed a little bit for these gases. And if you are involved in A2Ls and flammables, then you need to make sure that you're working to the latest version of the tables for those blends and gases, which is one of the reasons why this part of the standard may come back into the EN series, because we'll have more control over it's being updated. Part 2 hasn't changed so much. That is because it's introduced now, or it's aligned now with the Pressure Equipment and Machinery Directive. So the opportunity for people in standards rooms to frig around with it is limited, because it will then have to go before the SEN consultant to make sure it hasn't compromised it being harmonised with the PED or the Machinery Directive. They did change a table in there, which was for the protection of over excessive pressure. There used to be a flow table in there now, and it's all covered by a lot of words. I don't know that that's particularly easier, but anyway, this can be quite complex. There's also been 4 informative annexes added. Now they're informative. You don't have to follow them. They are, as it suggests, information only. Again, this is the 2016 version of the standard. Part 3 is to do with site installation and personnel protection, and the changes introduced there were to cover the A2L stuff and to permit the use of water sprinklers in ammonia machinery rooms on a condition that they cannot be overridden and they're heat activated. Now that could be a bit contentious, and I know there's an awful lot of ammonia refrigeration over in Ireland, and Seamus might well have an opinion on that. But that's history now. That deal's done. Part 4, which was the safety and environmental requirements, that's now got all the gas tables in it that were in Part 1, and I've kind of already covered that off, I think. So the IOR then produced a technical bulletin. That's produced by a different team than the guidance notes. This is done by the technicians section, and they talked about Part 1, which has all the definitions which are used in all the parts of the standard. Part 2 is mainly applicable to OEMs and designers, and that is, as we said already, mandated against the PED. A fairly important part of this is the note to readers about strength testing. As we move into dangerous fluids, the group 1 fluids as they are in the PED, this includes A2Ls and A3s. The bar is lowered for when the piping enters category 2 of the PED. At the moment, there's a derogation where we can pressure test at 1.1 times PS for SEP, so-called sound engineering practice, and category 1. For category 2, that's a bit different. You have to test at 1.43, or 1.1 if you can do volumetric NDE. Now, with ammonia pipework, yes, you can do that. Radiography or ultrasonics will cover that. But on a copper pipework system, of course, you can't do anything at all. Crack detection, surface breaking, crack detection techniques don't really cut the mustard. And in category 2, we also end up with having to have these processes and procedures approved by a recognised third-party organisation. Now, these guys, as you might find out next week, are probably playing by a different rule book, and what they'll be looking for is people that are doing brazing joints to have a similar qualification to welders, taking into account direction of flow, changes in wall thickness, changes in consumables, and all kinds of grand stuff that perhaps if you've only been doing brazing in accordance with a trade document like a City and Guilds or something, is going to be alien territory. So as a consequence, there's a standard called EN14276 that's available. When we wrote that standard for pressure vessels, we realised that there was no way of covering brazing and the competency of brazing and the proving of the procedures. We didn't have a mandate at that time to write the part on piping, so we had to cover the brazing in part 1 on pressure vessels. So it's an annex in the pressure vessel standard, but it is quite a useful document if you want to prove to your notified body that your brazers and your brazing procedures cut the mustard as far as the PED is concerned, because as I already said, piping for A2L and A3 has lowered the bar, and some of the bigger size pipe work and the higher pressures that you see in heat pumps these days could well mean that brazers are having to comply with category 2 piping. So a quick summary of what I've been saying is that EN378 is now out for public consultation, as Declan has said. It's a very different looking document now. We have 3 sections, and the main changes are in part 1, which includes some new concepts as far as charge limits are concerned. They have an intrinsic and an extrinsic design approach. Time doesn't permit us to get into that. You could probably spend a half day just talking about that in itself. The idea, the goal was to make it simpler and allow more design options, especially for the A2Ls and A3s. We're putting ammonia to one side. These guys are used to working to these kinds of restrictions, but the copper pipework systems, the people that are just hooking up a condensing unit to a ceiling mounted evaporator, may now find them in a bit of a different world. They will probably have to take on the responsibility of the manufacturer, and they will have to prove that they're doing the right things. So as I said, as Declan said, as I'm just said, there's these new documents out for public comment. I want everybody to read the read the standard, read in particular the bits that you work to, and if you've got comments, then put them in, not just as a criticism, but what your beef is and what your proposed change would be. The standards operating people are not looking for criticism, they're looking for solutions as to how this might shape up in the future. These have to be in by the 26th of August. We then sit down as our national committees and decide whether we're going to vote or a conditional vote to what the UK status and what the Irish status might be on this new standard, and to recommend changes. They will go to Sen and they will digest all of this, and it probably won't come out as a standard until the back end of next year. So whilst my brief was to talk about the 2016 and the IOR's guidance notes, I think the hard miles are now got to be done on the new PRE EN378. And when that does get published, then for sure our committees are going to be needing to do revised documents all around to interpret what this means to our members and contractors through the trade associations and the IOR. Right, okay, thank you, Declan.
Thanks very much, Dave. So now Dave has left some time at the end to take some Q&A. So if there's any question, if you just type it in the Q&A section. We'll be happy to read them out. So yeah, I will say thank you, David, in a moment. So in the meantime, have you had a chance to read through the new standard, David? I know it's only out last week.
So I have quickly looked at bits of it. The main part of my interest would be part 2 of the standard, which is the design guide, and because that is mandated, as I said, against the machinery directive and the PED, pressure equipment directive, they haven't had a lot of opportunity to change that. They can't change that easily without it having to go back into the consultants to confirm it still meets the PED or PESR as it is in the UK, although these things are run in parallel in reality.
Okay. And maybe a note on Brexit. Now, you may have to explain this, but obviously the UK has left the EU, but the CEN setup is completely different, and the UK is still a member of CEN. So there's a question here: what's the status of the UK's adoption of the new EN378? Will it just be the same as all the other EU countries, or how will that work?
Yeah, we will be working to EN378. It will be on a UK list of recognised standards, and that will be the go-to document for people that want to comply with what is known as the PESR in the UK. Okay. And the process, the inquiry process, is the IOR UK, are they planning anything at the moment in terms of the participation in the inquiry process, or is it just that interested parties can submit comments through the IOR? No, Steve Benton and Mandy Pearson, who I guess you know quite well, have done a lot of work. There was a presentation yesterday at the FETA offices in the UK to gauge opinions and to see what kind of problems people have with it. It was more of a learning session, to be fair, with Steve flagging up some of the issues, and there are many. Most of them, or a lot of them, are just editorial. Technical comments, they do exist as well. It's a whole new way of looking at things as far as charge calculations is concerned. As I say, there's this recognition of an extrinsic and an intrinsic design route. Time doesn't permit, and I'm not expert enough to try and explain all that to everybody, but people that are putting in A2Ls and A3 fluids, well, all fluids, in fact, they need to get their head around the new guidance on charge limits. Okay. Okay, thank you. And if I can share, so on the IOR website, just for the benefit of people who are attending, if you go to resources, now there are areas restricted for members, but if you go into resources, we have a new menu here for EN378 2016 and the proposed revision, and this is where the draft, the 4 new parts will be, the draft versions will be uploaded this afternoon. In here we have a section for the IOR, and the IOR has happily, kindly agreed to let us share these. So these are 3 of the documents that the IOR UK have. So these are, we would suggest, Dave, maybe you can comment on it, that anybody trying to understand the EN378 2016 and comment on the proposed revision, that these documents would be helpful Yeah, I've summarised those in
Yeah.
my presentation. Yes, of course they're helpful. There's some good stuff there about the pressure testing that I was talking about, and flagging out the requirement for appraiser qualifications. As you see there, there's all the 2016 charge limits information, but that's what we've got to work to at the moment. People hopefully are fairly conversant with that, but there's changes on the horizon.
And I assume the IOR UK will in time generate guidance documents on the new standard whenever it comes out.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's going to be a big drive for that whenever it comes out. We can't preempt it. Obviously, they're it's just not within our remit to preempt that. But when it's published, then that will filter across a lot of the IOR documentation.
Okay. And I have a question here. Are copies of EN378 available on the IOR UK website?
No, afraid not. It's a revenue generating thing. They're very expensive to buy. You can get them from overseas sites, and I think Steve Bentham pointed out that the Lithuania standard site, if you buy it from them, you will get it a lot reduced rate to what it's available through the BSI. But I didn't say that, of course.
Yeah, indeed, every SEN member makes these available for sale, and they set their own price. So, yeah. So and people are free to shop around. It is the same standard, but obviously in the UK it's called BS EN378. In Ireland it's called IS EN378, and the same applies across Europe. Okay, and maybe any closing comment from yourself, Dave, even as you're in your experience as for compliance inspection for the PED. Any advice to the industry and coming to terms with this?
Yeah, I wish that installers would get their technical files in front of their notified body before they do the install, rather than during or after it. It was a absolute nightmare for me when there was no technical file in existence, and as you know, that has to go away to a design appraisal office, and should they flag up something that's a disaster, then installation is already in hand. And it's impossible to do a retrospective certification. So my advice, talking about PED a little bit rather than EN378, is to get the technical file. It doesn't have to be the finished file, but generate the bones of that file before to a notified body, so that they can critique it before you plough in with the install. Okay,
terrific. Good advice. Thank you for that. So it's just 1 minute to go. So it just remains for me to thank you, David, for the presentation. Fantastic. Delighted to have your expertise.
And luckily the gas board hasn't turned up yet, Declan, so you haven't got my dogs howling in the background.
Yeah, I should tell everybody, yeah, you were a little apprehensive. You had a gas leak this morning, and I think there might be the emergency responders might be on their way to your house. So we're glad. Yeah. We're glad it hadn't exploded, at least before the webinar. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, David. And then just a heads up on next week, we have a webinar at the same time on Thursday, lunchtime, 1:15 to 1:45. Next week, we're delighted to have Fabrizio Spina, who's probably doing in a role similar to what Dave Paget was there for a different notified body from HPI Verification Services. And he'll be speaking about the global conformity assessment process and the ZA annexes in EN378, which are the ones you go to which point you to where the areas of harmonization are between EN378 and the PED. So that's on next Thursday, 1:15. Please, you can register in advance or just go to the website. You should be able to get through. So just thank you very much then, David, once again, and thank you all for attending. I'll close the webinar. There will be a recording and David's slides on our website in a day or so. So thank you very much. Over and out, and have a good day.